Anyone who wears an alb is simply a statement of, I'm a baptized person. And that includes priests. No matter what the style of the alb might be, and there are many styles, they all mean the same thing, that you're baptized. So the first thing I put on is the alb, and it traces its origin to the Roman tunic. And obviously it got longer as time went on. And the tunic could be different colors and different styles. So for example, this is also, that's a very small picture, but that's also a tunic. And it looks, if you think about it, it looks kind of like a dalmatic, right? I'm not sure that this one's any better. Nope, it's not. So this is still a tunic, but now we're probably looking at someone who's either a Christian, because we've got a Christian symbol up there. So my guess is that this is somewhere around the 3rd century, 4th century, perhaps. And again, what's interesting to me about this is that while the basic garment is what became the alb, the decorations on the garment carried over to other vestments. So I mean, I think that this is what we would call now a dalmatic, which, you know, we have some dalmatics here, one or two, and the dalmatic is actually a deacon's vestment or a subdeacon's vestment. And you can spot them because they have these vertical orphreys on them, usually front and back. So at least now the basic garment is beginning to look more like an alb that we recognize. So this is the better picture of a tunic. And again, can you see echoes of a chasuble? So there obviously were different styles of tunics in the Roman world, and they were worn by everyone. And you know what kind of fabric, the fabric that it was made of, and the decorations that it had would indicate the person's wealth or lack thereof. This is called the Roman pallium. And it's the forerunner of a deacon's stole. Now, there isn't anything that I've been able to find that can trace when things evolved from basic Roman wear into Christian things. I mean, why, for example, did this come to represent a deacon? I don't know the answer to that. But deacons wear their stole around their left shoulder, going down this way. And some even have stoles that do this, that go over the left shoulder, drape down, and come down one side. So this kind of looks like a chasuble, but this is actually the forerunner of the chasuble, called the Roman penula. And it was an outer garment that had a hood, often had a hood for cold weather. You can see there. And as history moved forward and Christian vestments, after the 4th century, when Christianity became the official religion and vestments just took off. I mean, they just went in all different kinds of directions. And what happened is that eventually this garment got split into two types of garments. But they were both chasubles, and they were both processional garments. But one was the outdoor processional garment, and one was the indoor processional garment. The indoor processional garment didn't have a hood. The outdoor one had a hood. The outdoor one evolved into the cope of a bishop, which the hood, if you've seen a cope, in the back is it's called a hood, but it isn't a hood. It's now a decorative piece that is like a flap. And it's usually comes over the shoulders, comes down like this, and has some sort of symbol on it. And the cope is open in the front and clasped together up here. And what's hanging in the back is that. It just evolved as processions moved indoors. The hood got changed into something decorative rather than functional. Should wear these? What?
The shoes on the right.
Oh, the shoes. Uh-huh.
With your black socks.
All right, let's see here. So there, this is I don't know if you can see that, but this is still the Roman penula. It's a little bit more fancy, but it's still a Roman garment. But this one really looks like a cope. I mean a chasuble. So that's the evolution of those garments from there. And the stole that clergy wear that goes over the shoulders has a different evolution than the deacon stole. They actually they seem to have evolved differently along different lines. But I've not been able to find any particular source or time when the stole began to appear. But I think that what happened is that they were scarves. In Rome, you had scarves that would go around the neck because the neckline of the penula is so open. They would wear a scarf around themselves, and sometimes that scarf would be draped over themselves in such a way to make it, fancy, but it was still a scarf. And it evolved and became the stole that clergy wear. And let's see. Now this is not something that is necessarily recognizable unless you can think really carefully. And I'm trying to think about whether any of our vestments, any of our chasubles have this decoration on them. But in Rome, this is called the pallium, and it's given to archbishops. It's a symbol of the Pope's authority. In our church, there are chasubles that have orphrey bandings. that look just like this. They go down this way and down. Most of the time they're in the back because they date from times when the altar was against the wall. And so the vestments often were plain in the front and had all of the decorations on the back. At home, I meant to bring this, and I forgot to bring it. At home, we have a chasuble that dates to, we think it dates to the 16th, 17th century, and it's called a fiddleback chasuble. And what's interesting about it is that it doesn't look like a normal chasuble. It has a wide section that looks more like a rectangle, drapes over the shoulders, but then it comes around in front and has a narrow, band in the front. Why it's called a fiddleback, I don't know, because that part would be worn in the front, and the larger part in the back so that people could see it. Carolyn rescued it from a antique shop. Someone found it and was going to take the embroidery off of it and use it for, something. And Carolyn rescued it before that happened. So nowadays, when clergy, when you look at clergy vestments today, all these practical things are lost, and they've taken on all kinds of meaning. I like to say that clergy are just perpetually out of style, because we wear stuff that's really, really, really old that no one wears anymore, but they used to. Everyone used to wear them. So the alb now is a baptismal garment. Some people give meaning to the cincture, which is the rope that goes around. To be perfectly honest with you, that's not my background. I haven't paid a whole lot of attention to the symbolism of the cincture. The stole has come to represent the yoke of Christ. And the chasuble has actually from the get-go was worn in Eucharists. It was always a Eucharistic vestment, and it continues to be a Eucharistic vestment to this day. Now, what I find, though, to be very interesting is how did this develop? Where did the dog collar come from, or the backwards collar? Well, now we are in we have to go back to the 17th century, and then at the tail end of 17th and 18th century, the tail end of the 18th century and into the 19th century is when this actually appeared. So that by the time of World War I, clergy wore dog collars. Some clergy wore the dog collar. But its origin is the cravat. If you watch old movies, you would recognize that as something people would wear.
With a fancy tie.
Oh, didn't mean to do that one. I'll tell that one later. Which is the one I'm looking for? Oh, here it is. So there are 17th century gentlemen. Some of those, this particular picture is a shot from a scene in a British show about lawyers from this particular time. And what I want to point out is you can see how on the cravat you've got this part that falls down, which eventually became the tie that men wear. But it also became, it's sort of an evolution that forked in the road, and the fork produced, and I get it here, these, which are called bands. Now these people are lawyers. These are modern day lawyers, or they don't call them lawyers in England. Barristers. But in the Anglican world, these are called preaching tabs. And they were worn by, actually they were worn by a lot of clergy, but they were particularly worn by bishops. Here's a bishop in his rochet and shamir, and I can never remember which one's the rochet and which one's the shamir.
Rochet is not red.
The rochet is not red. Okay.
The rochet is the white.
So that's the rochet. This is the shamir, and
I'm just here to
yeah. How many of you have seen a bishop wear that? This is a sad, sad statement of the Episcopal Church, I just have to say. Sad, 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 sad statement. Because bishops increasingly don't wear these around much anymore. They wear a cope and mitre. But when I was growing up in Ohio, the bishop would come for confirmation dressed in a rochet and shamir. That
sounds like what you put on.
And in the really good old days, the shamir was black, not red. But it has evolved into.
In the just as a footnote, in the Diocese of New York, up until the 50s or so, there was a big divide between high church and low church. It began in 1840 when they basically impeached the bishop for embracing the Oxford movement. But anyway, by the 1940s, it was a real divide, and the former rector of my parish in New York, Horace Donegan, was elected the suffragan bishop in 1947. And the bishop was very Anglo-Catholic, the diocesan. So Horace's idea of how to begin to mend fences was he had a driver, and the driver got him a suitcase. Remember those old two-sided suitcases that you open this way and they had a cover and you had to unlock it? Okay. So he had one of these. And one side had cope and mitre and an owl, and the other side held rochet, shamir, and
a stole.
Or tippet, okay?
Or tippet.
And so when you would arrive at a church, the driver would go into the church, and if he saw the Stations of the Cross on the wall, and if he could smell incense, it was high church, and then he would go and get the suitcase, and he would walk Bishop Donegan into the vesting room and say, left side. And if he walked in and he saw absolutely no sign of Anglo-Catholicism, not even the slightest hint of incense, right side, and the end result was that Horace Donegan was elected the next diocesan bishop of New York because everybody thought that he was a healer and a negotiator and was there for everybody.
In the Alex Stewart pictures, the bishop in the 70s, 80s, Alex Stewart, his bishop pictures that go around the churches, he's in that.
He's in a rock.
He's in a rochet and shamir. Yeah.
I just remember him having billowy sleeves.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so at Virginia Seminary, and this was in the 80s, and I was there in the mid-80s from 83 to 86. The clergy, whoever was doing Eucharist on Wednesday, we had a midweek Eucharist every week, and a member of the faculty who was a priest would do the service. They would always wear cassock and surplice and stole, not an alb and chasuble. And that's what I more or less grew up with. And the bishop would come to do confirmation in the rochet and shamir, which is the bishop's equivalent of the cassock and surplice. And he would just have a stole on, no mitre, none of that. So anyway, getting back to the dog collar, I found this. I don't know if you can see these. And these are all just different ways that the cravat or neckwear could be worn. And it is, most definitely the precursor to the collar. A couple other pictures here. There's the fancy one. There you've got the cravat that's been tied like a bow. Let's see what else we got here. There's another lawyer with with preaching tabs. And let me just say something about the preaching tabs. So the cassock, the black cassock that clergy wear, there are different kinds, but now pretty much today there's two styles. There's the Roman style and there's the Anglican style. The Roman style buttons all the way down the front, and the Anglican style is double-breasted. And the collar of the cassock, again, there are different styles, but very often what you'll find is that there'll be a neckline that's open here in the front, okay? The purpose of the opening was to provide space for the tabs, okay? The theory is that evolved into the Roman tab collar when everyone started wearing collars. At some point, the Roman Catholic Church wanted to distinguish itself from the Anglicans, and that's what they did. And the best guess that we have is that its origins are to the cassock, when clergy wore cassock as an everyday garment. They would go around everywhere in a cassock. Okay? So once you understand that they were wearing them all the time, well, now we've got the origin of the black shirt. Okay? When cassocks stopped being worn, the black shirt came to replace it, and of course the collar was always there. The precursor to this is the cravat. And but if I were wearing a cassock, you'd see the top portion of my dog collar, and then this section here that would be open where you could see everything. But that opening isn't just to show my collar; it's to have a place for preaching tabs. I think that was it. This is a bishop, William Juxon. Does that name sound familiar? No? Carolyn?
J-U-D-O?
J-U-X-O-N.
No. What was his claim to fame?
Well, you notice his collar?
Yeah, it's sort of a V.
Okay, so Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth, you've ever seen movies of her, sometimes they wear the ruffle thing, okay? Well, men would wear those also. And underneath them, to protect the neck, was a collar that was intentionally worn up. It pointed up. And you can often see them behind the cravat. Okay, so the collar was always up like this. But when the cravat gave way to the tie, it started to fall down. And long before that, some bishop pulled down the collar. And I don't know why. This guy might be the origin of fashion. It's an awfully big collar, but the Presbyterians claim that one of their own created the dog collar. Have you heard of that? That may be, but it was just someone who had the presence of mind to say, oh, the cravat, how could I keep that? And make it wearable. And that's the genius of that. And the collar that was underneath, of course, was open here, like collars today. And the backward collar, of course, just came to refer to the fact that these are open and closed in the back. So today, let's just say in my lifetime, clergy fashion has changed and not changed at one level. One of the things that's changed is at clergy conferences, for example. When I was first ordained, everyone wore a collar all the time. Even to clergy conferences, even when you're with other clergy, everyone always wore a collar. Now no one does. Not even the bishop. When it's just us, just wear street clothes. And when women were ordained, the blouse needed something. So the dicky came to be worn by women to wear underneath their blouse. And I said to myself one day, why should women have all the fun? You know, and because I don't like the black shirt. I don't like buying clergy shirts. They're A, they're not made well. B, they're too much money for the fact that they're not made well. For the longest time, what my beautiful bride would do is take a regular shirt and take off the collar, and then make a hole in the back, and take off the button in the front, turn that into a hole, and presto, I have a regular everyday shirt that I could wear as a clergy shirt. And then it hit me one day, you know, I could wear a dicky and just wear any old shirt or whatever, like what I'm wearing now. I'm waiting for it to catch on, because if you start to see it, I want you to remember me. Okay? And I want you to remember me. That Ben Jones started that trend among men. Among men.
The new Bishop Judson.
The other interesting thing about women's clergy fashion, by the way, and I'll pick on Carolyn for a moment. Because of the dicky, women can, wear, any color. And one of Carolyn's favorite colors is bishop purple. So she'll go around. She used to have a suit, a women's or dress. It was a dress.
No, I had both. When we first met, I had both. That was.
There are two kinds of bishop's purple. One is bluish purple, and one, how would you describe the other one?
Sort of a magenta type purple. Right,
they're really bright. Probably you've seen the magenta more often. And she used to wear that stuff, going around, she's looking like a bishop, and I would say to her, only you can get away with that. Only you.
Well, I could, because my dicky was still...
Right, your dicky was underneath it. But I think if I put on a bishop's purple shirt and wore this dicky, I think my bishop might pull me aside and say,
Yeah, the decorations on the stoles and everything, is there a reason for the different symbols, or are they just there?
Well, I think as a decoration, if you remember some of the pictures that I showed, Roman clothing often had bands, or frieze, or markings, or patches, or whatever on the garment, and how elaborate or how many they had were usually an indication of wealth. And so those decorations evolved over time. In clergy vestments, and they changed so that let's see if I can remember. Let's see. So let's if this were any other garment, who knows what this would have been in Rome? But obviously now it's got the symbols of the cross on it. Or you might see orphrey bandings that have, if you have to sometimes look carefully at them to see if there's anything there. It might be a circle with a triangle in it, you know, which is a subtle Trinitarian symbol. And there are lots of different kinds of crosses, and a lot of them have names. And I can't remember them all, but the Celtic style cross is one that people are familiar with. Very, you know, the Gaelic cross on Hartwell is a good example of the Celtic cross. But you've got the Jerusalem cross, which is a cross with 4 crosses in each corner. I don't know what this kind of cross was called. But the bandings themselves don't really necessarily have any symbolism, I mean, other than what's in the decoration itself. You can't go by a decoration on a vestment to say, you know, is that a priest or is that a dean of a cathedral or whatever. One way to spot the difference between a priest and, say, the dean of the cathedral is you'd only know if, for whatever reason, they were wearing a cassock, because at cathedrals, the dean will wear a purple cassock. Because in a cathedral, the bishop is the rector of the cathedral, and everyone there, including the dean, is actually an assistant to the bishop. And as a sort of symbol of we're at the cathedral, they can wear the purple vestment. That would be the only time that, you know, I couldn't go around in a purple cassock unless maybe I had an honorary title. I could be an honorary dean. That there is such a thing as honorary deans, but yeah.
Do you know when the colors for seasons started coming into?
You know, and that's a good question. Now, Carolyn may know more about this. I was about to say that at first there was no rhyme or reason. And again, it had a lot to do with how much money a particular church had to determine how many vestments they had, how decorative the vestments were. So you could very well be in a church that had one chasuble, and God only knows what color it would have been. I'm not sure exactly when the colors started to get narrowed to the particular season.
I want to say that it was probably in the 1400s. I want to say it was pre-Reformation, but the issue of colors in the Anglican Church up until the 1830s, 1840s, so from 1549 until mid-1800s, that wasn't that big an issue because morning prayer was, let me say it differently. If you read in the 1549 prayer book, Sunday worship began with morning prayer, then the litany, and then Holy Communion. And so the priest would vest for morning prayer, for litany, Holy Communion, in cassock, and surplice, and there wouldn't have been vestments. In the Roman Church, there were vestments, but I don't think the colors were as varied as we think about them today. In the Anglican Church, the colors, the various colors, are a derivative of the Oxford movement. And so, again...
And the Oxford movement was...
In the 1830s, there were a group of scholars in Oxford who wanted to take the Church of England back to the pre-Reformation roots that were there from Rome. You remember in the Reformation, they wanted to get rid of superstition, they wanted to get rid of the kind of pageantry that was directed to the Pope and all like that. And so they threw a whole bunch of stuff out with the baby with the bathwater. The Oxford movement people wanted to get back to the way the church worshipped in the early days. That meant Eucharist was the central service. And it meant that morning prayer was just something you read on weekdays, not Sunday morning as a precursor to the Eucharist. And that led to all kinds of fighting, both in England and when the Oxford movement arrived here in the 1840s and 1850s. It was seen as being papist. It was not the way true Anglicans were going to worship, because this wasn't what Cranmer wanted. And so the result was lots of rifts here in the United States and no colors.
And let me just say, in defense of the Oxford movement, that it wasn't just about, pageantry.
No.
One of their biggest contributions was social justice, and by that I mean advocates for the poor and for the hungry and the homeless. They had very, very directed ministry to the most needy people in London, where
London was their,
where it started.
their bailiwick.
Yeah.
As well as the docks of Liverpool, and just think of all the places in England in the 1830s where you had working class people.
So, over time, colors began to get associated with various times of the year. And there are colors that you probably have never seen, or maybe you've seen, but it'd be very rare. Like today is a pink candle on Advent, and there are churches that would wear pink vestments. But again, the only other time you'd wear pink vestments is when the pink candle occurs in Lent. So you got 2 times a year when you would wear pink vestments, and money's tight. You're going to justify,
So could they do a pink stole instead of the big flowing robe there?
Not if you're an Anglo-Catholic. If you're an Anglo-Catholic, you got to go the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
And a low churchman wouldn't even think of the question.
We had at least one priest that would put the chasuble on the altar rail.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, that's a carryover from morning prayer and Eucharist.
Yeah.
So you'd have the chasuble on the altar rail because you're doing morning prayer first, and then when you shifted to communion, you put the chasuble on. It doesn't make any sense at all to do that anymore. But when I was first ordained, there were clergy still doing it, and for no reason. I mean, it was the liturgy of the Word in the Eucharist, and then they go to the altar and have the chasuble put on. Well, that's not why that was done. And the colors continue to evolve. And so blue really has now, this is really not a new thing anymore. It's several decades now. Blue has slowly been taking the place of purple in Advent. And the reason things take so long is, again, it's a money issue. So if you've got a set of vestments already, and the rest of the church is moving in a direction where, like, say, they're going to get blue, well, we can't afford blue vestments, so we just keep using the purple ones. So, and the other color that's changing is during Lent. Instead of purple, the Lenten, what's called a Lenten array, is being adopted in many places. It's taking a long time because of the cost involved. But a Lenten array is a off-white. The basic color is off-white, and the decorative parts of it would be crimson, red, and black. And you could have all kinds of different symbols, perhaps in, the crown of thorns, for example, or nails sometimes are used as decorations for the Lenten array. I love the Lenten array. Purple is a symbol of royalty, and we could make an argument. Yeah, it belongs in Lent. But what is Lent? It's a time of fasting. It is a time of penitence. It is a time of, self-reflection, that kind of thing. It's a time when we're not particularly festive. And there's something about the sackcloth color that seems to capture that better than purple. Just saying. Yeah.
So the Lenten gray seems like it might blend well to wearing the sackcloth color as the robe, I can't remember the name it's called.
The chasuble.
The chasuble, and then have the yokes,
The stole.
the stoles, and all the different designs there.
Well, even the chasuble would have, like if they had orphrey bandings on the chasuble, they would be crimson, red, and black. Or you could have the crown of thorns on there. I mean, there are all different kinds of ways that it can be done. Just like any other vestment, you can be as creative as as you want to be. All right. Any other questions? Anything you're dying to know that I probably don't know the answer to?
I know you're talking more about clergy, but I noticed going in to help the acolytes that some of their white robes have hoods and some don't. Is there anything regarding the hoods?
That's just a style.
Just a
Yeah, it's still an alb. Whatever style it is, it's an alb, and it's a baptismal garment.
Greg likes hoods.
Yeah.
That's why we have.
Yeah. So it's it's a carryover thing where it had a practical purpose, and now it doesn't. But it looks cool. Yeah. And to each his own. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder kind of thing. And I have no feelings about them one way or another. I mean, they're fine with me. I mean, if you want to have hoods on them, great. If you don't, that's fine too.
Spending the time in there with the kids, the longer they're acolytes, then they start arguing about, I don't want to wear that robe, it doesn't have a hood.
Yeah.
And we have one lovable acolyte, a senior, who just won't give up his robe. His mother is laughing. He won't give up his robe because he likes his hood. How long has Joe been an acolyte? About 10 years? He loves his hood. And we don't have a long enough one for Joe with a hood. So look at Joe anytime.
Yeah.
He loves it.
Yeah. The only other thing about when I think about vestments at Christ Church, so take white for example. So we've got several iterations of white. We've got it's sort of a multi-season kind of vestment where it's a cream color with red and green and gold and all over it, and I'll wear it at Easter, Christmas perhaps. I don't think we have altar vestments that match. I've never seen them. Yeah. So it's nice when it all kind of comes together, and I don't know why we don't have the hangings to match. I don't know, but we don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They're
Thing again?
okay. Yeah.
What's interesting, nobody talking about our white vestments. What's interesting is we have a full matching set for funeral.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. So yes, we have the other one we have is white with a big red down the front, and that's the one.
Yeah.
Orphrey. Yes, we have a pall that goes with that. We've got the altar, the
pulpit hanging.
The pulpit hangings and the veil for the chalice and everything. So yeah, and I have a vestment that Carolyn and I purchased when we lived in Munster. There was a company that it's now been defunct and bought out by a Canadian vestment company, but they made what they called a Joseph's coat. And it's a cross between a cope and a chasuble. And I was initially intrigued by it because at the time I weighed 270 pounds and was perpetually in a state of sweat, looking for anything that would be cooler and more comfortable to wear. And the Joseph's coat is open in the front. That's the chasuble part. So it's got this open in the front. But it drapes all around like a chasuble, and a cope doesn't do that. So it is this interesting cross between the two. And they also made something that you could wear underneath it to give it the look of a chasuble. So here's the person we need to talk to, right here. The head of the altar guild. No, we were talking about vestments. That's all. That's all. So anyway, so next week, like I said, is Stump the Rector. Think of things you want to ask me, and fire away. I'll have Carolyn up here too. Honey, do you know the answer to that? Yeah. All right. See you next week.